Last September, we unearthed a tomato plant that had been planted horizontally back in May. Its root system had grown to the approximate size of a basketball. This single plant yielded 47 pounds of fruit, and remarkably, we hadn't provided any additional water for 6 weeks during the most severe drought of the summer. The sole deviation from our usual practice was its placement in the ground. It wasn't upright, not even close. What astounded us is that this simple technique is over a century old. The individual who established the Guinness World Record for the greatest quantity of tomatoes ever harvested from a solitary plant employed the same method in his backyard in Alabama in 1987. He gathered 342 pounds of produce from one vine, just one vine, and he never once dug a deep hole for it. Today, we are going to guide you through 5 of these innovative approaches. Every single one was devised by a dedicated gardener long before the advent of synthetic fertilizer manufacturers. Each method transforms ordinary vegetable plants into self-sustaining producers that nourish themselves throughout the entire growing period. This means no bags of artificial nutrients, no daily irrigation, and no more strenuous labor. Stay with us until the conclusion of Method 3, because that is precisely where the scientific understanding is most frequently misapplied. And as we reach Method 4, we will unveil a technique employed by an Austrian farmer to cultivate Mediterranean produce at an elevation comparable to the snow line. Most American cultivators have likely never encountered his name. So please, pour yourself a freshly brewed cup of coffee. This is Rooted Grace. Let's begin. Method 1. The sideways tomato and the kitchen spice. In 1987, a retired chemical engineer from Crane Hill, Alabama, named Charles Wilbur, made an entry into the Guinness Book of World Records. He had successfully grown 342 pounds of tomatoes from a single plant. Not from a particular variety, nor from a designated row, but from one individual plant. His neighbors were convinced he possessed some secret fertilizer. He did not. He was utilizing the identical compost, the same Better Boy seedlings, and the same clay soil common to Alabama that his neighbors were employing. The only distinction was the manner in which he introduced the plant to the soil. Here's a crucial detail that almost no one realizes about tomato plants. At any point along the stem, if you cover it with soil, those minuscule hairs you observe on the green portion will develop into roots within 10 days. Botanists refer to these as adventitious roots. They originate from cells known as parenchyma tissue. A pepper plant lacks this capability. A cucumber cannot perform this. Even most other members of the nightshade family are incapable of this. Only tomatoes and a select few of their relatives possess this inherent biological advantage. The majority of gardeners excavate a 6-inch vertical hole. They then place the seedling directly into it, firming the earth around the stem just below the lowest leaves. This results in approximately 2 inches of stem embedded in the soil, yielding about 2 inches of new root growth. Wilbur took the opposite approach. He excavated a shallow trench, approximately 12 inches in length and merely 3 inches deep. He then laid the seedling on its side. He gently curved the upper portion of the stem upwards, ensuring the leaves remained above the soil. Subsequently, he covered the remaining portion of the stem within the horizontal trench. Within 2 weeks, the entirety of the buried segment was proliferated with new roots. This established a root system of 1 foot instead of 2 inches. By midsummer, that plant boasted a root surface area roughly 10 times greater than a vertically planted tomato. It was capable of drawing moisture from soil that was parched on its surface. It could access nutrients that other plants were unable to reach. Now, here is the second element that is seldom discussed. Before placing the seedling into that trench, Wilbur would lightly dust the bottom with ground cinnamon. Older southern gardeners referred to this as the cinnamon trick. Ground cinnamon contains cinnamaldehyde, which effectively inhibits the damping off fungi, specifically the Pythium and Rhizoctonia pathogens that are detrimental to young tomato seedlings at the soil line. A 1/4 teaspoon beneath each plant creates a pathogen-free zone for the developing root system to expand into. Some gardeners opt for ground turmeric instead. That method is also effective. Either spice will suffice. Use whichever has been residing in your pantry for a duration you'd rather not admit. Here's what you'll observe by July. While your neighbor's tomato plants are wilting each afternoon and requiring daily watering, your plants will remain upright and vigorous amidst the heat. The horizontally developed root system accesses water that your neighbor's plants cannot locate. The cinnamon layer prevents the lower stem from decaying during damp periods, and the plants yield 2 to 3 times more fruit because every leaf and every blossom receives complete nourishment. One tomato planted sideways, combined with one spice from the kitchen, that's the entire secret. However, the horizontal tomato method has a single vulnerability, and this weakness is precisely what Method 2 addresses. Method 2. The Buried Worm Tower. In 1972, a woman in Kalamazoo, Michigan named Mary Applehoff purchased a pound of red worms for $4 and housed them in a wooden container beneath her kitchen sink. 10 years later, she published a modest book titled Worms Eat My Garbage. That publication achieved sales exceeding 165,000 copies. It effectively inaugurated home vermicomposting in the United States. What most readers overlooked in her work was a solitary chapter near the conclusion, where she detailed the practices of some of her subscribers. They had entirely abandoned the use of the container. They had procured a section of PVC pipe, perforated it with numerous holes, and buried it directly within their vegetable gardens. The worms would naturally migrate in and out of the pipe. Kitchen scraps were deposited directly into the top, and the plants thriving around the pipe flourished. She termed it the worm tower. Permaculture gardeners in Australia were implementing a similar concept concurrently. 2 distinct continents, the same innovative idea, with no internet to facilitate shared knowledge. Here's how we construct our own. Obtain a 4-inch diameter PVC pipe, approximately 18 inches in length. These are available at any hardware store for less than $5. Drill 1/4-inch perforations across the lower 12 inches, spaced every 2 inches in all directions. Excavate a cavity in the center of your raised garden bed, deep enough to fully submerge the perforated section. The upper 6 inches should remain exposed above the soil, fitted with a removable cap. Plant 4 tomato or pepper seedlings in a square formation around the tower, approximately 18 inches distant from the pipe. Now the work commences, and it is remarkably minimal. Every few days, deposit your kitchen scraps into the top. This includes coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, vegetable trimmings, banana peels, and dry leaves. In the autumn, the worms naturally present in your soil, numbering in the thousands within every cubic foot of healthy garden earth, will seek entry into the pipe through the drilled openings. They consume the scraps. Their excrement, which is essentially the most potent organic fertilizer available, gradually permeates the surrounding root zone of your 4 plants. You are effectively composting directly adjacent to the roots that require the nutrients, rather than in a distant pile. Here's the element that truly surprised us. During our initial year experimenting with this, we measured the soil composition 4 feet away from the tower in October. Subsequently, we measured the soil 2 inches from the tower. The soil immediately adjacent to the tower exhibited 4 times the available phosphorus and 3 times the nitrogen content compared to the soil located 4 feet away. The worms had essentially constructed a direct fertilization conduit from our kitchen counter to our tomato roots. A $4 tube of plastic populated by worms already inhabiting our garden, utilizing kitchen refuse that we would have otherwise discarded. However, there remains a persistent issue that has yet to be effectively addressed, and it's likely the area where many of you have regrettably expended the most funds. Method 3 offers the solution to this. Method 3. Sheet mulching implemented correctly. In 1992, a hotel housekeeping manager from the Berkshire Mountains in New York, named Patricia Lanza, grew weary of the incessant weeding in her 3-acre garden. Her back ached. Her hands were stained dark from the arduous task of uprooting crabgrass and ground ivy. She had been a gardener her entire life, but the traditional methods had become unsustainable. Consequently, she ceased digging. She proceeded to her garden, equipped with a stack of old newspapers, a wheelbarrow filled with compost, and a bale of straw. She laid the newspapers directly over the existing weeds, ensuring the edges overlapped. She then layered compost atop the newspapers, followed by straw. She then departed. 6 weeks later, the weeds beneath the newspapers had perished. The newspapers had decomposed into the soil. The compost was already teeming with earthworms. She planted directly into the uppermost layer that same summer. She named it lasagna gardening due to its layered structure. Her book, bearing the same title, was released in 1998 and sold over 200,000 copies. Today, numerous organic farms incorporate variations of her methodology. Here's where the process is most commonly executed incorrectly. And this is the aspect that nearly jeopardized our garden during our first attempt. Most online tutorials advocate for the use of large sheets of cardboard as the foundational layer. This seems logical, as cardboard is often readily available at no cost. Dr. Linda Chalker Scott at Washington State University has dedicated over 20 years to researching garden mulches. Her published findings indicate that excessively thick cardboard layers can actually suffocate the underlying soil. They impede oxygen exchange necessary for root and microbial activity. More concerningly, modern corrugated cardboard frequently contains PFAS chemicals, often referred to as forever chemicals, present in the adhesives and coatings. This is not an ideal material to have situated 6 inches beneath your tomato plants. What Lanza originally employed, and what remains the most effective approach, is plain newspaper. 5 to 7 layers, thoroughly moistened and overlapped at the edges. Newspaper decomposes more rapidly than cardboard. It facilitates gas exchange. The ink used in contemporary newspapers is almost universally soy-based and entirely safe. If you only have access to cardboard, that is acceptable. However, it is crucial to perforate it with holes every 6 inches using a garden fork before covering it with compost. These perforations are essential for allowing oxygen to reach the soil microbes beneath. Next, layer on top of the newspaper 2 inches of compost or well-rotted manure, followed by 2 inches of grass clippings or finely chopped leaves, and a final 2 to 3 inches of straw. This constitutes your prepared bed. When planting, create a small, cross-shaped incision through the layers. This exposes a pocket of bare soil beneath. Place your seedling within this opening. The plant will then draw nutrients from the slowly decomposing material above it throughout the entire growing season. The weeds underneath are effectively smothered. You eliminate the need for digging, for weeding, and for purchasing fertilizer. A 3-foot-tall, weed-free, self-nourishing garden bed can be established in a single afternoon. However, before we proceed to methods 4 and 5, and we assure you, method 4 is the one that captivates everyone on our channel, we wish to offer you something complimentary. We have compiled all the information presented in this video, along with precise measurements, seasonal timing for each technique, troubleshooting guides, and a printable shopping list, into a free PDF resource we've named the Self-Feeding Garden Blueprint. The majority of items on this list cost less than $5. One of our viewers in Ohio implemented the worm tower method detailed on page 6 and harvested 86 pounds of cherry tomatoes from a single 4x8 raised bed last summer. Previously, they had been obtaining approximately 20 pounds. To access the blueprint, simply scan the QR code displayed on the screen now, or click the first link in the description below. If you are viewing this on a television, open the camera application on your smartphone and hover it over the screen. The link will appear in approximately 3 seconds. It is entirely free, and upon obtaining it, you will receive a new, often overlooked gardening method each week. Alright, let's get back to it, because what follows is from a gentleman who cultivated Mediterranean fruits on a snow-covered mountainside in Austria, and most American gardeners have never even heard his name. Method 4. Hugelkultur, the buried log garden. In 1962, a 20-year-old man named Sepp Holzer inherited his parents' farm in the Lungau region of Austria. The farm was situated at an elevation of 4,900 feet, nearly a mile up the mountainside. The average annual temperature was 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Winters would plummet to 25 degrees below zero. There were 170 frost days annually. The local inhabitants referred to it as the Austrian Siberia, and they informed the young Holzer that he could cultivate nothing there but grass for cattle. He attempted conventional farming for 3 years. Every endeavor ended in failure. Subsequently, he began consulting ancient German agricultural texts from the 1500s and 1600s. He repeatedly encountered references to a practice that the old peasants termed hugel culture, which roughly translates to mound culture. The old farmers would bury decaying logs and tree branches beneath their garden plots. They asserted that the wood provided sustenance to the soil for decades. Modern agriculture had disregarded this as a folk superstition, deemed unnecessary in the era of chemical fertilizers. Holzer had nothing to lose. He excavated a long trench across his hillside, filling it to a depth of 3 feet with fallen logs, branches, sticks, and brush gathered from the surrounding forest. He then covered it with sod, compost, leaves, and topsoil. He shaped the entire structure into a mound, approximately 5 feet in height. Within 2 years, he was successfully growing cherries, apricots, lemons, and figs at altitudes where his neighbors maintained only spruce trees could survive. 40 years later, his farm now features 70 ponds, terraced beds extending up the mountainside, and yields more food per acre than the conventional farms situated in the valley below. He has provided consultation on agricultural projects in over 40 countries. Here's the actual function of the buried wood. As logs decompose underground, they absorb groundwater and rainwater much like a sponge soaks up a spill. A buried log can retain up to 9 times its dry weight in water. During summer droughts, this water is gradually released.